Yo, what up, everyone out there in YouTube land? Grimm's on the beat here. So today I got a few quick mix tips for all you beginning mixing engineers and beginner producers and beat makers. Your subject today is how to deal with clashing kicks and bass lines. For those of you that make hip hop or R&B, a lot of times the kick and the bass line will be very close in fundamental frequencies, and they'll tend to clash, and you'll have to fight to get them to cut through. So there's a few little tricks to do that. So I'm not going to do any examples because some of these tips require using plugins with the sidechain input. And depending on what DAW you use, setting up the sidechain may be different. Like in Logic, it's super easy. You just go to the sidechain input on the plugin where you select the sidechain input and you just select pretty much any track in your session, and it's that easy. With Pro Tools, you got to go to the track that you want to use as a sidechain input, or the signal you're sending to the sidechain input, and you put a send on it. For more specifics, look up a tutorial on YouTube specific to your DAW on how to set up a sidechain, and you'll find something that goes into more detail. I'm just going to be covering the techniques, how to execute the techniques. You can find tutorials on that go into specifics. Okay, so the most commonly used technique is using a compressor with a sidechain input on the bass line and setting the sidechain input to the kick. For those of you that don't know what a sidechain does, basically you send a signal to a plugin, in this case a compressor, and the signal being sent to the sidechain input triggers the plugin, but the plugin affects whatever track you have it on. So in this case, it's a compressor on the bass line. The kick drum is what's triggering the compressor, but the bass line is what's being compressed. So you want to set your attack and release, I recommend, to the fastest setting, because you pretty much just want to get the initial transient. No makeup gain, because you want to reduce the volume. You're not trying to get everything more consistent and all that stuff. Then ratio, probably anywhere from 3 to 1 to 6 to 1, but you can experiment with it, find what works best for your track. And then threshold, it depends. I would just play with the threshold until you get about 3 to 6 decibels of gain reduction, or whatever works for your track to get the kick to cut through. Now you might want to be careful with this trick, because too much gain reduction will create a bit of a pumping effect, and if you go overboard on it, it will be noticeable. You want it to be kind of subtle, just enough for the kick to come through. Some genres of music, you want a pumping effect. So, I mean, there's how you can get that. If you're working on one of those genres of music and you want a pumping effect on your melody and you can't figure out how to get it easily, yeah, a compressor with a side chain connected to the kick will work for that. Next trick is similar to the first one, but it involves using a multiband compressor with the sidechain input. Now, in this one, you want to use a spectrum analyzer to find the fundamental frequency of the kick. You basically disable all the bands and set the low band to whatever the fundamental frequency of the kick is. Set up a sidechain on the plugin, and then it should trigger that low band that's not bypassed. And instead of compressing the entire signal of the bassline, you're only compressing that fundamental frequency of the kick, and it's being triggered every time the kick hits. So it's not going to be compressing the whole time, just when the kick hits. Attack and threshold, I recommend same. Quickest attack, quickest, or not attack and threshold, my bad. Attack and release. Quickest attack, quickest release, because you just want to get that initial transient. I mean, it's basically the same as a compressor, it's just you got multiple bands like an EQ. The next trick is similar to a multiband compressor, but with a dynamic EQ. But basically the same. You set a low band set to the fundamental frequency of the kick to duck every time the kick hits. Once again, there's going to be a dynamic EQ with a sidechain input. Okay, and the last trick, pretty simple. You just put an EQ on the bassline, find the fundamental frequency of the kick, and cut it out by probably 3 to 6 dB, but use your ears, find however many dB works for your track. It might be more, might be less. Like I said, use your ears, find what works for your track. And if that's not working, maybe try cutting somewhere in the low mid, somewhere between 300 hertz to 500 hertz. Use your ears to find what works. Maybe try a little bit of both. And then a bonus trick is make a duplicate of your bassline track and whatever's on it, and then throw a high pass filter on one and a low pass filter on the other. So say you set the low pass filter to cut off everything above 200 hertz, you want to set the high pass filter to cut off everything below 200 hertz. And then you just use the normal compressor on the low one, and you can still have the higher one not being compressed. This also allows you to put different effects on them, and you can like add some distortion or something to the one with the high pass and still have that low end be nice and beefy, because when you use distortion on bassy signals, you tend to lose a little bit of low end definition, a little bit of that low end punch. This is a way to keep it. It also lets you control how the bass sounds in the mix. If you want your bass line to have a little bit more low end, just have the one with the low pass a little bit louder. If you want more high end, then the one with the high pass a little bit louder. Gives you more control in the mix. So that's a cool little bonus trick that works for a few different things. Of course, all of these little mix tricks can work for different applications. The only limit is your imagination. I got plenty of tricks that I learned from watching videos from rock mixers. A lot of them I haven't really used, some of them I have. It's all how you apply it. Get creative with it. Alright, guys, I'm out. Hopefully, this helps someone out there. Have a good day.